He was the face on every teen magazine, the certified genius on a Steven Spielberg TV show, and the absolute idol of millions. Jonathan Brandis seemed to have the world at his feet. With his signature blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and an easy charm that made him feel both like a superstar and the boy next door, he was the quintessential 90s heartthrob. But behind the smile that charmed an entire generation, there was a pain that almost no one could see. This is the story of how one of Hollywood's brightest young stars, a young man who seemed to have it all, fell into a darkness from which he would never return. It's a story of incredible highs, devastating lows, the crushing weight of fame, and the silent battles that are so often the most fierce. This is the tragic story of Jonathan Brandis. The story of Jonathan Brandis doesn't start in Hollywood, but in the quiet town of Danbury, Connecticut, where he was born on April 13, 1976. He was the only child of Mary, a teacher, and Gregory Brandis, a firefighter and food distributor. From an incredibly early age, it was clear that Jonathan had something special, a spark that just drew people in. His career in front of the camera started almost as soon as he could walk. At just 2 years old, he began modeling, his cherubic face a natural fit for print ads. By the time he was 4, he was already doing TV commercials, bringing that charisma to life for audiences at home. This wasn't just a hobby, it felt like a calling. Seeing their son's talent and genuine passion, his parents supported his career completely. When he was just 6, he landed his first real acting role, a recurring part on the popular ABC soap opera One Life to Live, playing Kevin Buchanan. And this wasn't just some kid being placed in front of a camera. Jonathan was a total pro, learning his lines, hitting his marks, and holding his own with seasoned actors. That kind of potential was just too big to ignore. When Jonathan was 9, the Brandis family made a huge, life-altering decision. They packed up their lives in Connecticut and moved all the way across the country to Los Angeles. It was a massive gamble, a leap of faith into the super-competitive, often brutal world of Hollywood, all for their son's dream. But that gamble paid off almost right away. Jonathan's talent was undeniable, and he quickly became a sought-after guest star on some of the most iconic TV shows of the late 80s and early 90s. And the list of shows he was on? It reads like a TV Guide Hall of Fame. He popped up in L.It. Law, Who's the Boss?, The Wonder Years, and Kate and Allie. He had a memorable spot on Full House and even showed his dramatic side on Murder, She Wrote, proving he could handle comedy and drama with a maturity well beyond his years. Every role was another stepping stone, another chance to sharpen his skills, and another showcase of his incredible range. He wasn't just another cute kid, he was a serious actor learning his trade in the most public way possible. Even with this whirlwind of auditions, rehearsals, and filming, Jonathan was serious about his education. He went to the San Fernando Valley Professional School, which was designed for young performers, so he could balance his schoolwork with his demanding job. By all accounts, he was a bright and diligent student, a trait that would soon define his most famous character. This whole period was a whirlwind of success, building a solid foundation of experience. He was a kid who grew up in the industry, but he was also a professional earning his stripes. These bright beginnings were just a hint of the supernova of fame that was about to ignite. 1990 was a massive year for Jonathan Brandis. At just 13, he went from being a familiar face on TV to a real movie actor, landing 2 roles that would cement his place in pop culture history. The first was the lead role of Bastian Bucks in the never-ending story 2, The Next Chapter. Taking over a role from a beloved fantasy classic is a huge undertaking. The original film had captured the imaginations of kids everywhere, and stepping into that world came with immense pressure. Brandis played Bastian, the boy who literally gets lost in a book, and he brought a new sense of vulnerability and grit to the character. The filmmakers auditioned over 600 kids for the main roles, but Jonathan was the one who secured the lead, but it was his second big role that year that would haunt and captivate audiences for decades. He was cast as the young Bill Denbrough, the earnest, stuttering leader of the Losers Club, in the TV miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's horror masterpiece, It. The miniseries was a cultural phenomenon, terrifying an entire generation with Tim Curry's iconic Pennywise the Dancing Clown. As Stuttering Bill, Brandis was the heart of the story. He had to portray the deep trauma of losing his little brother, Georgie, the guilt that came with it, and the incredible courage it took to rally his friends to fight an ancient evil. His performance was just incredible and was praised by critics and audiences. He later said it was one of the toughest roles he'd ever taken on, especially getting Bill's stutter to feel authentic and not like a caricature. It was a deep, emotional performance that showed a maturity far beyond his years. And it's a fun piece of fan trivia that this might not have been his first brush with the Stephen King universe. Many fans believe he had a subtle, uncredited voiceover role a year prior in Pet Sematary, a little detail that connects two of King's most famous adaptations. With these two massive projects, the floodgates opened. Jonathan Brandis wasn't just a promising child actor anymore, he was a star. Hollywood noticed, and he was quickly cast in a series of films that showed off just how versatile he was. In 1992, he starred opposite the legendary Rodney Dangerfield in the comedy Ladybugs. He played a skilled soccer player who pretends to be a girl to help his coach's failing team. The role required physical comedy and a lot of charm, and he proved he could hold his own against a comedy giant. Later that year, he shared the screen with another icon, Chuck Norris, in Sidekicks. He played Barry Gabrewski, a bullied kid who daydreams himself into adventures with his hero. It was another lead role that mixed action, comedy, and a relatable underdog story. Through these roles, Jonathan was building an impressive and diverse resume. He'd done fantasy, horror, and comedy. He'd worked with legends and had proven he could carry a film. He was no longer on the rise, he had arrived. But the level of fame he'd reached was nothing compared to what was coming next. A single TV show, backed by the biggest name in Hollywood, was about to launch him from stardom into the stratosphere. In 1993, at 17 years old, Jonathan Brandis landed the role that would define his career and turn him into one of the most recognizable faces of the 90s. He was cast as Lucas Wolenzak in SeaQuest DSV, a futuristic, high-concept sci-fi series produced by none other than Steven Spielberg. Just having Spielberg's name attached was a massive seal of approval. The series was set in the near future on a massive, high-tech submarine, with Brandis playing a brilliant teenage computer genius. His character, Lucas, was the audience's way into this complex, futuristic world. He was a kid surrounded by adults, and often the smartest person in the room. He was a complex character, incredibly intelligent, but still dealing with the normal struggles of being a teenager. The role was perfect for Brandis. The show's creator, Rockne S. O'Bannon, recalled what made Jonathan so special, saying, "He was the kind of actor that I love to work with, a smart actor. He was someone you could talk to. He understood the scenes from a structural point of view." SeaQuest DSV was an instant hit, and Jonathan Brandis became its breakout star. The role shot him into the dizzying heights of teen idol status. His face was everywhere, plastered on the covers of magazines like Teen Beat, Bop, and Tiger Beat. Posters of him were on the bedroom walls of millions of teenagers. The fan response was just overwhelming. At the peak of his popularity, Brandis was getting around 4,000 fan letters a week. The mania was so intense that he needed 3 security guards just to get through the crowds of adoring fans who would gather daily at Universal Studios, hoping for just a glimpse of him. He was living a life most kids could only dream of, but he tried to stay grounded. In a 1994 interview, he said, "I never perceived myself like this, a teen magazine kid. As an actor, you just hope to continue working." But the pressure that came with this level of fame was immense. Every part of his life was under a microscope. His relationship with actress Tatiana Ali. During his time on SeaQuest, Jonathan also started to explore his ambitions behind the camera. He wasn't content just saying his lines, he wanted to understand how everything worked. He co-wrote the story for an episode of the series titled The Siamese Dream, which was a huge achievement for a teenager on a major network show. He was even supposed to direct an episode, but the show was unfortunately cancelled before he got the chance. He also lent his voice to the Disney animated series Aladdin, voicing the recurring villain Mosenrath, an evil young sorcerer, showing off his range even further. For 3 years, Jonathan Brandis was on top of the world. He was a talented actor on a hit show, a creative force with big ambitions, and a beloved teen idol. But the same machine that builds stars up can be fickle and unforgiving. The brightest lights in Hollywood often cast the darkest shadows, and the peak of his fame also marked the beginning of a slow, painful decline. The world saw the smiling superstar, but behind the scenes, the pressures were building, and the ground was already starting to shift beneath his feet. The TV industry is brutal, and even the most popular shows don't last forever. For SeaQuest DSV, despite a strong start and a loyal fanbase, the tide started to turn. After 2 seasons, the show went through a major overhaul. The title changed to SeaQuest 2032, the setting jumped forward in time, and key cast members, including the lead Roy Scheider, left. The show's tone got darker and more militaristic, and it lost some of its original audience. Jonathan stayed on, with his character Lucas now a more central figure, but the magic was fading. In 1996, after 3 seasons, NBC cancelled the series. For Jonathan, the cancellation wasn't just the end of a job, it was the end of an era. At just 20 years old, he was already an industry veteran, but now he faced the toughest challenge of his career, making the jump from teen idol to respected adult actor. This is a notoriously hard path in Hollywood, one that many child stars fail to navigate. The very image that made him famous, that boyish charm, the teen heartthrob persona, now became a pair of golden handcuffs. Casting directors and audiences just couldn't seem to see him as anything else that he wasn't the kid from It or the genius from SeaQuest anymore. He was a young man trying to find his place in an industry that seemed to have already typecast him. The job offers, which used to be constant, started to slow down. The big leading roles in major films just weren't coming his way. He found himself taking supporting roles in TV movies and smaller independent films like Ang Lee's Civil War drama Ride with the Devil. These roles showed he was still a serious actor, but they didn't have the commercial punch to redefine his public image. You could feel the struggle. Friends noted that he was finding it hard to adjust. Some suggested that because roles were handed to him as a kid, he wasn't prepared for the grueling process of auditioning and fighting for work as an adult in a ruthless market. He was trying to evolve, seeking out more mature, challenging roles, but he was often overlooked. He co-starred in a film called Bad Girls from Valley High in 2000, but because of distribution issues, the movie sat on a shelf and wasn't released until 2005, 2 years after his death. Every setback, every role that fell through, was another blow to his confidence that he was caught in a professional purgatory. To the world, he was still Jonathan Brandis, the 90s teen idol, frozen in time on old magazine covers. But in reality, he was an ambitious actor fighting to be seen for who he was now. He wasn't just Lucas Wolenzak anymore, but shedding that skin proved to be an agonizingly slow and frustrating process. The career that had once been a rocket ship was now stalling, and for someone who had only known success, that feeling was deeply unsettling. The frustration began to fester, compounding the personal struggles that were brewing just beneath the surface. The new millennium didn't bring the career comeback that Jonathan Brandis so desperately wanted. Instead, it brought a series of professional blows that would have a devastating impact on his mental health. The career lull that started after SeaQuest was no longer a temporary stall, it felt permanent. The frustration and sense of failure began to take a heavy toll, and according to his friends, he grew deeply depressed about his career. The biggest and perhaps most crushing blow came in 2002. Brandis landed a role in the high-profile war drama Heart's War, starring Bruce Willis and Colin Farrell. This was supposed to be it. This was the chance he'd been waiting for, a serious role in a major Hollywood film with A-list stars. He saw it as his comeback, the project that would finally let him break free from his teen idol past. He poured all of his hopes into this part. But when the film was released, his excitement turned to absolute devastation. His role, which he believed would be substantial, had been almost completely cut from the movie. For an actor who had pinned his professional future on this project, the rejection was a profound and public humiliation. It was a clear message that he was disposable. The disappointment from Hart's War was a wound that never really healed. It seemed to confirm his deepest fears, that his moment was over, that Hollywood had moved on without him. After that setback, his depression deepened. Friends said he started drinking heavily, using alcohol to try and numb the pain. He would even talk openly about wanting to end his life, a cry for help that showed just how deep his despair was. Another glimmer of hope appeared in 2003 when he was cast in a TV pilot called 111 Gramercy Park. Once again, he invested his hopes in the project. Actor Jaleel White, who worked with him on it, later recalled how intensely eager Brandis was for the show to succeed. But the industry delivered another brutal blow. The network decided not to pick up the pilot. For Brandis, it was another closed door, another confirmation of his feelings of failure. In his final years, he became more and more isolated. The vibrant, charming young star was retreating into himself. His father, Greg Brandis, would later reflect on this time, suggesting that Jonathan was likely struggling with an undiagnosed mental illness. In a 2021 interview, he told People magazine, "I look back now, and in his 20s, he showed signs of manic depression." His death wasn't due to the entertainment industry. His friend, actress Soleil Moon Frye, found old voicemails from him while making her documentary Kid 90. Some of them were 10 minutes long, his innermost thoughts, she recalled. "It just made me cry listening to them." These rambling, heartfelt messages were a sign of the turmoil he was in, a manic energy that friends now see as a symptom of his struggle. A few days before his death, Jonathan showed up unannounced at his parents' house. "He wanted to be with us. We knew something was wrong," his mother, Mary, later said. "We knew something was weighing on him, but we didn't know what it was or how bad it was." The bright-eyed boy who had conquered Hollywood was now a man lost in a fog of depression, addiction, and despair. The downward spiral was pulling him deeper into a darkness that his friends and family could see but couldn't fully stop. On the evening of November 11, 2003, Jonathan Brandis was at his apartment in Los Angeles, hanging out with some friends. By all accounts, the evening wasn't unusually dramatic, but those close to him had been worried for a while. They knew he was depressed, they knew he was drinking a lot, and they had heard his dark talk about not wanting to be alive anymore. But knowing someone is in pain and knowing how to stop it are two tragically different things. At some point that evening, Jonathan left his friends and went into another room. When he didn't come back after a while, his friends got concerned and went to look for him. What they found was an unimaginable horror. In the hallway of his own home, Jonathan Brandis had attempted to hang himself. He was found at around 11:40 p.m., frantic. His friends immediately called 911. Paramedics rushed him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but the injuries were too severe. Jonathan Brandis never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead the next day, on November 12, 2003. He was only 27 years old. He didn't leave a suicide note. There was no final explanation, no words to make sense of the senseless. There was only the deafening silence left behind. His friends were left with the horrifying memory of what they found and the haunting question of what more they could have done. His family was left with an unbearable grief, a private pain that was suddenly thrust into the public eye. His mother, Mary Brandis, would later say of his final act, "I think he didn't think of us and all the people who were his friends, and all the people he impacted. It was a sad act, and he must have been in a lot of pain to do it." The news of his death sent shockwaves through the industry and among the millions of fans who grew up with him. How could the boy with the infectious smile, the brilliant kid from SeaQuest, the brave leader of the Losers Club, be gone? It seemed impossible. The cause of death, suicide, was a stark and brutal end to a life that had once seemed so full of promise. The tragedy wasn't just in his death, but in the long, lonely struggle that came before it, a struggle that was happening in plain sight, yet was ultimately invisible to those who might have been able to help. The death of Jonathan Brandis unleashed a wave of grief. Fans who once filled his mailbox with thousands of letters a week now filled internet message boards with tributes and shock. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office even reported receiving dozens of emails from his massive internet fanbase, a testament to the lasting mark he left on a generation. For many, his death felt like a piece of their own childhood had been shattered. In the immediate aftermath, his family, seeking privacy, had him cremated and held a small service for friends. They were overwhelmed by the memorials that sprang up online. But as they processed their loss, they also began to speak out, hoping their son's story could help others. His father, Greg Brandis, has been particularly open, sharing his belief that Jonathan suffered from a severe, untreated mental illness, likely bipolar disorder. He has worked to destigmatize the conversation around mental health, emphasizing that the pressures of Hollywood weren't the root cause, but a symptom of his son's deeper struggle. "I hope that anyone suffering can go get help," he stated, a simple, powerful plea born from the most profound loss. Jonathan's story has become a poignant and cautionary tale about the immense pressures on child stars and the critical importance of mental health awareness. His life and death highlighted the brutal transition from teen to adult stardom and the psychological toll that a stalling career can take on someone who has only ever known success. His legacy is also preserved in the work he left behind. The image of him as the bright, hopeful Lucas Wolenzak or the determined young Bill Denbrough remains unforgettable. And his story has been given new context through projects like Soleil Moon Frye's documentary Kid 90, which used his own words from old voicemails to offer a raw, intimate glimpse into his state of mind. His life is a somber reminder that the brightest lights can cast the darkest shadows, and that behind the most public smiles can be the most private pain. The story of Jonathan Brandis is heartbreaking. It's a reminder of the human being.